Ashton Kutcher exposes the dark secrets behind Diddy's mansion, hidden cameras, secret parties, and a web of fear and control revealed in court. Ashton Kutcher entered the courtroom with a determined look, the weight of years of silence pressing heavily on his shoulders. The room buzzed with anticipation, everyone eager to hear what the famous actor had to say about the secret world behind P. Diddy's mansion doors. Known for his candidness and passion for justice, Ashton was no stranger to speaking out. But this was different. This was personal. He took a deep breath before beginning. What I'm about to reveal isn't just gossip or rumor. It's the truth about what happened behind the closed doors of one of the most exclusive parties you could imagine. His eyes scanned the crowded courtroom before settling on Sean P. Diddy Combs, who sat cool and composed, seemingly unaffected by the storm about to break. As someone who once was invited to these exclusive events, I can tell you the reality was far from glamorous, Ashton continued, his voice steady but edged with anger. These parties weren't just lavish celebrations. They were carefully orchestrated scenes where drugs flowed freely, violence simmered beneath the surface, and blackmail was a tool wielded in the shadows. The crowd shifted uncomfortably as Ashton described the hidden cameras, installed not for security, but to record every vulnerable moment, every secret interaction. Footage was collected, stored, and used to control and silence those involved. No one was safe. No one was truly free. He paused, swallowing hard, then pressed on. For years I kept quiet, but silence only enabled the darkness. Today, I'm here to break that silence, to make sure the truth is heard. The courtroom fell into a heavy silence, the tension thick as Ashton prepared to expose a world most never imagined. A world where power and fear ruled behind the velvet ropes. When Ashton Kutcher first received the invitation to the private event at Sean P. Diddy Combs' mansion, it felt like a dream come true. As an actor known for his outspoken nature and work advocating against injustice, Ashton wasn't unfamiliar with celebrity circles. But this was different. The invite promised an exclusive night with some of the biggest names in entertainment, a chance to network, relax, and enjoy the luxury reserved for the elite. The invitation was discreet, delivered in a sleek black envelope embossed with the iconic Diddy logo. Inside was a simple card. Join us for an unforgettable night. Private, discreet, invitation only. The location was a sprawling estate tucked away in the hills of Los Angeles, a place whispered about in the industry, but rarely seen by outsiders. As Ashton arrived, the grandeur was undeniable. Marble columns, pristine gardens, and elegant fountains set a scene that screamed wealth and exclusivity. Staff dressed in black moved silently like shadows, ensuring privacy and security. Cameras were everywhere, but they felt more like part of the spectacle than tools for protection. At first, the party seemed exactly as advertised. Glamorous, vibrant, alive. Music pulsed through the vast rooms, laughter echoed off the high ceilings, and glasses clinked in celebration. Ashton mingled with artists, producers, and influencers, all drawn into the night's magnetic energy. Yet, beneath the surface, something was off. It didn't take long for Ashton to notice the subtle shifts in atmosphere. Certain guests were corralled into private rooms, their faces tense, their movements guarded. Waitstaff hurried past with wary glances, and hushed conversations stopped abruptly when unfamiliar eyes approached. The mansion felt less like a haven and more like a carefully controlled environment. Ashton soon learned why. Behind the scenes, cameras were installed not just for security, but to spy on guests and staff alike. Hidden in smoke detectors, behind paintings, even inside decorative items, these lenses recorded every moment, capturing intimate conversations, moments of weakness, and the inevitable mistakes people made when they thought no one was watching. What Ashton uncovered was a chilling system of surveillance designed to control, intimidate, and manipulate. Guests who stepped out of line, those who questioned the rules or tried to leave early, found themselves targeted. Footage was leaked selectively to ruin reputations or to threaten silence. Whispered warnings circulated among attendees about knowing too much and how easily a career could end. The parties weren't just wild nights of fun. They were a stage for power plays, where blackmail was currency and fear was the law. One night, Ashton witnessed an incident that left a lasting scar. A young artist, barely 20, was cornered in a dimly lit hallway by a group of men. Their words were sharp, their tone threatening. Later, Ashton learned that footage from the hidden cameras was shown to this artist, a private screening meant to remind him that his secrets were no longer his own. "I saw fear in his eyes," Ashton would later tell the court. Not just fear for his career, but for his life. That moment shattered the illusion of the party. It was no longer about celebration. It was about control. Ashton tried to speak out privately, to warn others, but his words fell on deaf ears. Many were too afraid. The mansion was a fortress of silence, built to protect secrets that could destroy lives. The reality was horrifying. What seemed like a night of glamour was a trap, a well-oiled machine designed to exploit vulnerability, enforce obedience, and maintain power through intimidation. Despite the risks, Ashton refused to be complicit any longer. He began gathering evidence, quietly recording conversations, and reaching out to those who had been trapped in the same web. His decision to come forward wasn't made lightly. He knew the potential fallout. But the weight of silence was heavier. The parties were just the tip of the iceberg. Behind the velvet curtains and champagne toasts lay a culture steeped in fear, secrecy, and abuse. As Ashton Kutcher prepared to share his story in court, he knew he was not just fighting for himself, but for the countless voices that had been silenced for too long. As Ashton Kutcher took the stand, the courtroom was silent, every eye locked on him, every ear hanging on his words. What he was about to reveal would shatter the carefully constructed image of Sean P. Diddy Combs' legendary parties. Ashton began by describing the mansion's eerie atmosphere behind the scenes. "It wasn't just about luxury and excess," he said. "There were places within that estate where the walls seemed to close in, where the air grew thick with something darker." He detailed how guests and staff were restricted from accessing certain forbidden zones. Doors remained locked, security personnel were ordered to turn away anyone who asked questions, and whispered warnings about these areas were passed between staff, with a mix of fear and resignation. But it wasn't just about physical boundaries. Ashton spoke of a pervasive culture of control that extended to the smallest details of life within the mansion's walls. Phones were confiscated upon entry, communication was monitored, and any attempt to connect with the outside world was swiftly curtailed. "The cameras were everywhere," Ashton explained, his voice steady, but his eyes filled with the weight of memory. Hidden in bathrooms, dressing rooms, even bedrooms. Private moments were no longer private. They were weaponized. He told the court about secret screenings where footage was shown privately to guests as a tool of intimidation, a constant reminder that no one was truly free or safe. One particularly chilling example involved a young female artist named Jade, whose name Ashton protected. Jade was one of the many drawn into the mansion's orbit, lured by promises of fame and success. Ashton recounted the night he saw Jade leave a party looking shaken and disoriented. "She confided in me that she had been shown a video of herself, taken without her knowledge, and that it was used to coerce her into silence." Jade's dreams were being held hostage by the very people who promised to launch her career. The hidden cameras created a fortress of fear that trapped guests in a constant state of anxiety. Ashton spoke of how guests walked on eggshells, watching their words, their actions, never sure who was listening or watching. He also revealed how staff were complicit, some willingly, others under threat. Employees who tried to question orders or pry into forbidden areas found themselves reassigned, blacklisted, or simply disappeared from the estate. This was a system designed to crush dissent. Ashton explained how this secrecy wasn't limited to the mansion. The footage, the information, it was circulated in closed circles of power. It wasn't just about protecting the estate. It was about maintaining influence, control beyond the walls. The court heard testimony of how this shadow network was used to manipulate careers, ruin reputations, and silence those who dared to speak out. As Ashton detailed these horrors, the courtroom's atmosphere shifted. The reality behind the glossy headlines and red carpet photos was beginning to take shape. An empire built not just on music and business, but on fear and coercion. He told of whispered stories among guests about others who had vanished after attending these private events. Young artists, producers, and insiders who suddenly dropped off the radar. Their social media went dark. Their families left with unanswered questions. "It was like the mansion swallowed them whole," Ashton said quietly. The prosecution presented emails and security logs Ashton had painstakingly collected, showing unusual access patterns to these restricted zones during the parties. The documents revealed shifts of personnel assigned to monitor guests with unsettling precision. Further testimonies from former staff corroborated Ashton's account. Stories of secret rooms, surveillance centers, and orders to intimidate and control. As the evidence mounted, it became clear. The mansion was not just a playground for the elite. It was a prison disguised in opulence, where power was wielded through hidden cameras and silent threats. Yet, Ashton's resolve never wavered. Despite the fear, he was determined to bring these dark truths to light. "Every day I stayed silent, more people were hurt," he told the court. It was time to break the cycle. His testimony was a rallying cry for the victims trapped in the mansion's shadow. The courtroom hung on every word, as Ashton Kutcher painted a vivid picture of the hidden horrors lurking behind the mansion's gilded facade. He recounted how the mansion operated like a fortress of fear, where control extended far beyond locked doors and hidden cameras. It was a meticulously crafted environment designed to break down the will and autonomy of those inside. Everyone was watched, everyone was controlled, and anyone who resisted paid the price, Ashton said, his voice steady but filled with anger. He described the layers of surveillance, not just visual, but electronic and psychological. Phones were monitored, text messages intercepted, emails scrutinized. Guests were isolated from the outside world, cut off from family and friends, their every move dictated. Ashton revealed how some guests were drugged or coerced into compliance, with substances slipped into drinks, leaving them vulnerable and confused. The aftermath was often a haze of memory loss, fear, and silence. "There were nights when I saw people crying in hallways, terrified and alone," Ashton said. "But they had no way out. They were trapped by fear, by threats, by the knowledge that speaking out meant destruction." He spoke of a disturbing pattern. Those who tried to leave or expose the truth were systematically silenced. Careers were destroyed overnight, contracts canceled, and blacklists circulated within the industry. Ashton recounted one harrowing case, a young singer named Lila, whose promising career was snuffed out after she refused to stay silent. After a night at the mansion, Lila began receiving anonymous threats, messages warning her to keep quiet. "She tried to speak out," Ashton said quietly, "and then she disappeared." The courtroom gasped. Whispers rippled through the gallery. Ashton explained how he and others had tried to help Lila, but the mansion's power stretched far and wide. Attempts to investigate were stonewalled, witnesses intimidated, and evidence buried. The defense lawyers tried to dismiss Ashton's testimony as hearsay and rumor, questioning his motives and credibility. But the prosecution presented a growing pile of corroborating evidence: witness statements, emails, security logs, and even fragments of the hidden footage Ashton had managed to obtain. One piece showed a blurred figure being led into a locked room, the door closing behind them with a chilling finality. As Ashton spoke of these locked rooms, he emphasized their true purpose: not privacy, but imprisonment. Those rooms were designed to keep people out of sight, out of mind, he said, to hide the things that shouldn't see the light of day. He revealed how staff were instructed to keep silent, told that loyalty meant never questioning orders. Those who broke the code found themselves out of work and ostracized, their careers effectively over. Ashton's testimony wasn't just a recount of facts. It was a call for justice for the countless victims whose voices had been crushed beneath the mansion's shadow. He looked around the courtroom, his gaze hardening as he faced Sean P. Diddy Combs directly. "You built this empire on fear and silence," Ashton said. "But silence ends here." The mood in the courtroom shifted palpably. The glamour and glitz surrounding the case had given way to something far darker, a reckoning with the real cost of power and control. As the day drew to a close, the jury was left to ponder the full weight of the accusations. Behind the doors of a luxurious estate lay a world of secrets, pain, and exploitation. But with Ashton's voice breaking the silence, a path toward truth and justice had finally been lit. As the trial advanced, the tension in the courtroom became almost palpable. Ashton Kutcher's searing testimony had pierced through the mansion's glittering facade, revealing a disturbing culture of control, fear, and manipulation that few had ever dared to imagine. The public was no longer dealing with rumors or gossip. The harsh realities were now laid bare for all to see. One by one, former employees, artists, and insiders stepped forward, courageously sharing their experiences. Each new voice added pieces to a grim puzzle: whispered warnings exchanged behind closed doors, secretive meetings where loyalty was enforced with veiled threats, and an atmosphere thick with intimidation. Claire, a former assistant, spoke tearfully about discovering hidden cameras in the dressing rooms and private suites. "It was like living in a fishbowl," she recounted. "There was no privacy. Every moment, every whispered conversation, every vulnerable second was being watched and recorded." Her testimony underscored the chilling extent of surveillance, not merely for security, but for control and exploitation. Another former security guard revealed how he had been pressured to erase hard drives, destroy footage, and obliterate evidence. "I was told to make sure nothing could link back to what really happened inside," he said grimly. "They wanted the past buried deep, with no chance of resurfacing." The prosecution brought forth extensive documents, coded logs of visitors who came and went mysteriously, lists of names that suddenly disappeared from the records, and financial trails that funneled money through complex offshore accounts. These transactions were tied to hush money, payments intended to silence victims and cover up the abuses. Ashton detailed a harrowing moment when he secretly recorded a conversation among senior mansion managers, plotting their next moves to handle troublesome guests. The tape was damning. It revealed discussions about intimidation tactics, legal threats, and veiled references to making problems disappear. "This wasn't just a party mansion or a place to make music deals," Ashton told the jury, voice heavy with conviction. "It was a fortress built to control, to dominate, to silence anyone who dared to speak out." The defense team fought back fiercely, attempting to discredit witnesses by questioning their motives, suggesting bitterness or fabrication. They painted Ashton as an outsider, eager to settle scores. But the evidence was overwhelming. The jurors exchanged glances, visibly shaken as layer after layer of deception unraveled. The court was no longer a spectacle of celebrity defense. It was a battleground for justice and truth. As Ashton wrapped up his testimony, his final words resonated deeply. This is not just a story about one mansion or one man. It is a story about a system that protects the powerful by silencing the vulnerable. The fear and silence perpetuate abuse, and that must end. He locked eyes with Sean P. Diddy Combs and declared, "The time to hide is over." Outside the courthouse, Ashton's words ignited a wildfire of outrage and support. Social media erupted. Hashtags like #Justice for Survivors and #End the Silence dominated trends. Survivors and insiders began sharing their stories, breaking decades of enforced quietude. The walls of secrecy and impunity that had shielded the mansion began to crumble under the weight of truth. Yet, the struggle was far from over. Powerful forces resisted, legal battles loomed, and attempts to suppress the truth continued. But with each new voice that rose, the fortress weakened. For Ashton and the countless others who had suffered in silence, the hope of justice grew brighter. The verdict was more than a legal decision. It was a seismic shift. After weeks of harrowing testimony and unmasking the hidden horrors behind the mansion's walls, the jury returned with a verdict that echoed far beyond the courtroom. Guilty on multiple counts: illegal surveillance, coercion, intimidation, and abuse of power. A stunned silence fell over the packed gallery. Sean P. Diddy Combs sat motionless, the mask of composure slipping for a brief moment. Ashton Kutcher exhaled deeply, his eyes reflecting the weight of the victory, not just for himself, but for every voice silenced for too long. Outside the courthouse, the atmosphere was electric. Reporters shouted questions, flashbulbs exploded, and crowds gathered in a mix of celebration and solemn reflection. Ashton stepped forward, addressing the sea of cameras and microphones. "This isn't just a win in a courtroom. It's a message to survivors, to victims, and to those who believe silence is their only option. You are not alone, and justice is possible." His words rippled through social media and news outlets worldwide. Survivors began to share their stories openly, emboldened by the courage displayed in court. The entertainment industry was forced into a long overdue reckoning. Calls for reform, transparency, and protection for artists and employees flooded public discourse. But Ashton knew the battle was far from over. Powerful interests remained entrenched, and the mansion's secrets were only the tip of a larger iceberg. The culture of fear and control still lingered in many corners of the industry. Yet, the courage of one man, and those who stood with him, had shattered the illusion of untouchable power. The walls of secrecy had cracks now, and those cracks would grow. As Ashton looked back at the courthouse steps, he felt the quiet strength of change beginning to take hold. The fight for truth and justice would be long and hard, but it had begun, and the world was watching. "My hope," he said quietly, "is that no one else ever has to live in that kind of fear. That we build a future where creativity isn't shackled by silence, and where every voice is heard and respected." With those final words, Ashton Kutcher turned away from the cameras and into the sunlight, not as just a witness, but as a beacon for change.